Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to present about teaching listening and I hope you guys enjoy. Okay, so the first one is the role of listening in language learning. The first one is exposure. The first feature to consider is exposure to the language. Babies and young children are exposed to massive amounts of talk in their acquisition of a language. This same concept of listening in the early stages of language learning is central to natural approach and total physical response. Learners are allowed to large blocks of time to listen before they are asked to speak. And then the second one is provide plenty to listen. So you have to be prepared to include in your lesson segments where you talk a lot to your class. So this means that you have to be prepared to include your lesson segment about something. Maybe it's about educational system, or maybe about demography, or something that you want your students to know. And then lower stress. Stress can do and does block learning. So by making sure that your lessons are motivating, you can relieve your students of the stress and boredom that often blocks learning. And then let your students' brains works. So you have to playing like a music or cassette, some things about songs with English words while you are working with your students on a project. So if your students working on project or something, you can try to give them music or something so that they can do their project, uh, and they can learn the words and the intonation of the songs as they get on their work. And then meaningful real life messages. So in this feature of successful informal language learning is considered to have a meaningful messages. So it's like take of real life communication from exercise in which students are asked to listen and repeat, or asked to complete listening exercise without any preparation on the content and the situation of listening passage. And then built-in response time. So this one is many listening exercise are transformed into memory exercise. Because the listener's response come only after long stretches of speech. And you can avoid this by requiring short active response occurring during or between parts of listening passage rather than at the end. And then allow for the visibility of the speakers. So this means that listeners can usually see the person or people that's speaking in a real life, and the visual clues offered by the speaker, like if the speaker like the speaker's expression or the speaker's gestures, and it is really helps the listeners to understand what the speaker is saying. And provide background clues. Clues provide a framework and context for a spoken message, and your student use the clues unconsciously when they are talking to each other on their own language. But remember to provide clues and to help your student use them when they are listening to English. Your clues could be simple as a picture of the place or something that you are talking about. And if your exercise involves talking about traveling, you could draw something about traveling which you brings to your students' attentions. And then allow for redundancies. So in everyday conversation, people use a lot more words than are necessary. So people in real life use a lot more words than are really necessary to convey their messages. So like they start sentences several times over, they correct themselves, and they use fillers such as you see, I mean, and well, and these repetitions, false starts, correction, and fillers are redundant. So your students need experience and identifying and separating the main ideas from these redundancies, which are part and parcel of everyone's speech. The next one is resources for teaching listening comprehension. So there are three resources that really helpful for students. So the first one is the teacher. So we as a teacher have to tell something and explore something to the students. And please don't be afraid to use gestures and dramatizations to catch your students' attention and to get your message across to them. And this is very important because if you're trying to use gesture or dramatization, like the students will more know what you are saying and they can listen to you clearly and they will get them. So you need to make your students attention to you. And then other speakers of English. So like if you're trying to invite native speakers to the schools, that would be really good for them because the native speakers can try to tell the students about something or maybe their life or maybe their country that is a new knowledge about them, and it really helpful so that the students know how to say this word and so on. And then the last one is tips. This is your third and the last resource for listening comprehension to your students. You can give them tips about something that is kind of interesting for them. And then the characteristic and examples of good listening exercise. So the first one is you have to provide interesting content. You have to use interesting story to catch your students' attention. Maybe you can use such as story about nowadays like a coronavirus or maybe something that your students maybe like. Maybe you can try to use movies and songs that could be interesting for them and you will catch their attention fast. And then include listening preparation. So taking time to prepare your students means that taking time to work on their motivation. You'll be aiming to stimulate their interest and to make the purpose of the listening clear. To explain the specific post-listening task and to convince them that they can and will be successful to be listeners. And then the last one is offer visual support. If you add visual clues like maybe a drawing, like pictures to your students, it is makes them to be more interesting, and your students could be more feel easier because there is a visual support like a picture. And encourage the whole message listening. Whole message listening, the goal is to listen for the main ideas and not to be distracted by details or failure to understand individual words. And then encourage listening for specific details. Exercise in which students listen to a passage and then complete charts or graphs encourage listening for specific detail. This kind of exercise complements whole message listening. The emphasis in this case is on carefully detailed listening. And then next one is communicate real meaning. So the students want to communicate in English because they had something to say and had interest in hearing what was said. So this attitude spilled over into the classroom, and the volunteer was delighted to find himself teaching a really motivated group who made excellent progress in English. And then require listener response. So you have to ask a response that listener's way of saying I hear of you, I hear you. As was said earlier in this chapter, listening is not taught in isolation. Speaking comes into play as listeners respond and interact on a conversation. And this listening exercise, which call for a response from your students to allow them to demonstrate their understanding and to develop interactional skills. Thank you. Okay, I think that's all for today. Thank you so much for your attention to my presentation. I hope you have a good day. Bye bye.